Hi, welcome to Focus Talk. Today we're going to interview China analyst Mr. Goldon Chang to talk about recent reports about Chinese Communist Party's infiltration of American elite circles. Mr. Goldon Chang joins us remotely on Skype. Hi, Gordon. Great to see you.
Oh, hi. Thank you so much.
Hi. Thank you for coming to our show. Lately, there's so many reports about Chinese Communist Party's infiltration of the U.S. society. I don't even know where to start. But this particular incident about Congressman Eric Swalwell is very alarming. So let's start there. I'm sure a lot of media have already interviewed you about this incident. So recent reports have shown that Congressman Eric Swalwell had ties with a CCP spy named Fang Fang back in 2014 and earlier. He was warned by the FBI in 2015 before he cut ties with her. Eric Swalwell is on the House Intelligence Committee and has access to this country's top secrets. What does this whole thing tell us?
Well, first of all, it tells us how extensive China's Ministry of State Security has penetrated the American political system. First of all, yes, sitting on the House Intel Committee is important to Beijing, but that's not the first time that China contacted him. They contacted him for the first time when he was on the city council of Dublin City, California. And that means that Beijing is trying to groom American politicians all over the country at very low levels, hoping that they will rise in influence, which is, of course, what Swalwell did. He got a seat in Congress, and then he got a seat on the House Intel Committee. So this is, for China, was a great bonanza. I don't know if they got anything from him, but it shows you the persistence of their efforts. We know that there are hundreds, probably thousands of Ministry of State Security agents in the United States, but we also know that there are hundreds of thousands of collectors of intelligence for China. And that's because China has this 1,000 grain of sand approach where they interview returning business people, tourists, students, to get information which they then collate with artificial intelligence and big data. So we know that China has thoroughly penetrated the United States and has many, many collectors of information and intelligence.
So this is shocking. That means that this is not an isolated incident, and it shows that CCP does take years to try to cultivate this kind of relationship, and they send thousands of spies into America, right?
Right. Well, Fang Fang, for instance, she not only was bundling cash for Swalwell's campaign, she also was able to place an intern in Swalwell's office. So God knows what happened there. And the other thing, according to the Axios reporting, Christine Fang, had sexual relations with two Midwestern mayors. Now, Swalwell has yet to deny or confirm the allegations that she had sex with him. And so, therefore, there's a lot more there that we need to find out, because obviously that could lead to China having information about Swalwell that they could continue to use, even though Fang Fang returned to China in 2015.
Now, should the FBI do more in terms of alarm these politicians? Why are American... Go ahead.
Yes, of course, the FBI should, but the FBI is overwhelmed. FBI Director Christopher Wray this year said that almost half of the Bureau's counterintelligence cases are China-related. And he said that the Bureau opens up a China-related case every 10 hours. And when you look at the other cases, that other countries are running, China probably benefits from information that Russia or Iran, for instance, collects. So law enforcement in the U.S. is just completely overwhelmed. And that really means that we are at a critical point, because this is an espionage emergency.
So why are American politicians fall for the CCP honey trap so easily? You just mentioned that Fang Fang had sexual relationship with at least two local politicians. Is that because the lack of awareness?
That's a great question, and it's a question I really don't have an answer to, because you think that they would be smarter, but obviously they are not. At this point, we've had a lot of people in the political class talk about Russia, including Swalwell, for instance, when they should have been saying China. And that's a real indication that there is a failure of perception here. It's not a sin to be targeted by China's Ministry of State Security, because that's true, I'm sure, of all 435 members of the House of Representatives and the 100 senators. But what's the problem here is that Swalwell has not been forthcoming. And indeed, sitting on the House Intel Committee, he should realize the danger that China poses, but he doesn't talk about that in public. He only talks about Russia, which is a real indication that he's propagating a Chinese narrative. And that's an indication that Christine Fang, although she's no longer here, is exercising some sort of influence over Representative Swalwell.
Wow. Some people said that they even have a recent connection on Facebook as recent as like December or October.
That's right.
Go ahead.
Swalwell's father and I think brother or something still are in contact with her on social media.
Yeah. Even the director of national intelligence said that the CCP is the biggest threat to the country. But we don't hear much about it. We always hear Russia. But lately, there are tons of reports and evidences and incidents coming up showing that CCP's threat to this country is growing. So this spy incident is a vivid example showing how CCP has been cultivating its friends in America's core inner circle of power and influence. Now, this is the exact words from that explosive Di Dongsheng video. Di Dongsheng is a professor in China's Renmin University in Beijing. And in that same video, Di Dongsheng also told a story about how a DC bookstore owner was coerced into agreeing to publish the Xi Jinping book after initially refusing to do it. That was shocking. So is this one of the common tactics the CCP is using to manipulate their so-called friends in America to achieve what they want?
Yeah, China does that. And it shows you the thoroughness of their penetration. Because, we're talking about a presentation by an author at Politics and Prose, of the famous Washington bookstore. I mean, they've actually got down to that level where they try to exercise influence. But of course, Politics and Prose is one thing. The White House is another. And Di Dongsheng, when he was talking about this on that November 28th audience event, which was broadcast around China, he was just chortling about how China was looking forward to the return of the elites to the American political system, to the center of the political system, because he was saying that in administrations prior to that of President Trump, that China could do what it wanted to, could talk to the White House, could get outcomes that it wanted. But it couldn't do that during the Trump administration. But they were looking forward to being able to do that with a Biden presidency. And that's a real warning that China is going to have that influence to be able to make those, to be able to determine those outcomes at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
So to what extent do you think the CCP has infiltrated American elite circles, not only political, but Wall Street, business, all these big corporations?
Yes, and it's educational institutions, and it's not just colleges and universities. It's also prep schools. You have the Confucius classrooms in secondary schools, the foundations, NGOs. If there's an institution in the U.S., China is targeting it. So China's influence here is vast, which means that we've got a lot of work to do to remove the Chinese Communist Party from our society, because they are certainly up to no good.
How did they do it? How come they're so successful in terms of infiltrating American elite circles?
That's a really critical question. And there are a couple of reasons. First of all, they just bought influence. And we can see this in the sordid tale involving Hunter Biden, President-elect Biden's son. So there's just out-and-out money. They hold out business opportunities, which is something that Republicans are complaining about with Brian Kemp, the Republican governor of Georgia. But also, there's a more fundamental issue here, and that is, we Americans at the end of the Cold War thought that history had ended, to borrow that phrase from Francis Fukuyama. And they thought, things didn't matter anymore. And people believed that if we integrated China into the international system, if we worked with China, if we showed it goodwill, if we helped China strengthen itself, that they would reciprocate. But China didn't become benign, as the proponents of engagements told us. It's become more aggressive, more belligerent, more hostile, more dangerous. So we've got to ditch a half century of thinking about China. And that, of course, takes time. But, it seems to me that the danger is clear and present, and we have got to act immediately because we don't have much time to lose. Xi Jinping, the Chinese ruler, he doesn't talk about competing with us in the international system. He is floating these ideas that China has the mandate of heaven over Tianxia, or all under heaven. And China actually acts like emperors of old who believed that they were the only sovereigns in the world, which means essentially that, Americans are just subservient. We don't have a country. We don't have sovereignty. Now, I know that sounds ludicrous, but we've got to listen to what Chinese leaders are actually saying. And they are dropping hints that they should be considered the world's only sovereigns. So they've made it very clear, and we just have not been listening.
Well, in other words, we were caught off guard, right? But I think part of the responsibility lies with the media or with the globalists who often promote this kind of narrative. I don't know if they truly believe it or if they promote a narrative for some own purpose. But people were told, let's have this engagement policy with China, and they will eventually become a fair player. Isn't that what we were told in all last 40 years?
Yes, we've been told that. This goes back to Richard Nixon's famous article in Foreign Affairs, where he says that we can't leave the Chinese outside of the international system there to nurture their hates and fantasies. But Nixon later understood that, as he said to Kissinger, that we may have created a Frankenstein. And indeed, that's exactly what happened. So, you talk about why Americans feel this way. Mm-hmm. Well, I think some Americans are just generally naive. And I think other Americans know what's going on, but they propose these multilateral notions of the way the world should be for commercial purposes, to enrich themselves. But whatever the motivations are, that's wrong, and we've got to change course. And if we don't change course, we're going to lose our country, because China poses an existential risk to us. And if we don't understand the fundamental nature of the challenge, we're going to lose, and we're going to lose our country.